Christmas album, Sneak Peek, The Brightest Star by FERN Michaels, Chapter 14. It took a couple of seconds for her to find her voice. "May I help you?" she asked, suddenly realizing what she must look like. She had on a faded pair of jeans with her old Uggs, which were stained from years of use and definitely should have been replaced years ago. Knowing how cold it would be this morning when she dressed, she wore an old undershirt, then added a worn but comfortable chambray shirt. On top of that, she wore a thick red wool sweater. Her braid hadn't lasted throughout the night, and she'd done nothing more than run a brush through her long blonde hair. She'd even foregone her usual black mascara, leaving her blonde lashes bare. All this came to mind as she stared at her customer, who was so well put together, she wanted to cringe just thinking about what she must look like to him. He was tall, probably at least 6'3", and over 200 pounds, and it was all muscle. His thighs strained against dark denim, and the cream-colored sweater he wore was stretched to the max by his broad shoulders. Dusty blonde hair, way too long for her taste, touched his shoulders, but he tucked the sides behind his ears. He had the bluest eyes she'd ever seen, bluer than Madison's, bluer than her own. Good grief. He was a real live version of Thor, the Marvel character played by Chris Hemsworth. She'd lost her ability to speak, so she just stood there, dumbfounded by this hunk. What was someone like him doing in her store? "The door was open," he said, breaking the silence, his voice deep and sexy. "Oh yes, sorry, I was working in the office." She raked her hand through her messy hair. "What can I help you with?" In her wildest imagination, she'd never seen such a stud. She couldn't help it. There was no other word in her broad vocabulary to describe this man. "Well, I'm not really sure. I was looking for something unusual, a gift for a friend. Their birthday. It is Christmas." And hope gone, but of what she had no idea, other than a sick, sort of sinking feeling. But she'd wished for customers, and here he was. "Okay, well, do you have something particular in mind? A unique decoration, a sweatshirt? They are hand-painted, one of a kind." She watched him watch her. The butterflies danced in her midsection, and she felt dizzy. Before she did or said something she'd regret, she turned away and walked to the back of the store, where she had a display of Christmas music boxes. She felt his presence before turning to face him. These are exclusive to Razzle Dazzle. We're the only store in North Carolina that sells these. So the chance of your friend having received one as a gift is slim to none. Of course, if you're new to the area and your friend has friends who might shop here, then, well, good grief. What in the name of Pete is wrong with me? She was sounding like a 13-year-old who's just come face to face with her first crush. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. He leaned in to examine each music box. Exquisite. He actually looked at the price tag located on the bottom. Exquisite price too, he added. Another gush of heat rose to her cheeks. Yes, but worth every penny, she managed to squeak out. Actually, I was thinking they're worth much more than you're selling them for. Surprised, she was at a loss for words. Lauren couldn't recall any customer she'd had in the past 3 years telling her their prices weren't high enough. Personally, I would double the price, he added as he ran a large, well-manicured hand across the globe of one of the more expensive music boxes. I'll take all of them. How quick can you have them wrapped? What? You want all of them? Her heart sank even more. Whoever the recipient of this gift was had to be someone super special. She casually glanced to see if he wore a wedding band, which nowadays didn't mean much, but still, she couldn't help herself. His ring finger was minus any jewelry. It will take a couple of hours if you want them packed for shipment, but if you just want them in their boxes, gift wrapped, I can have them ready in about an hour. Perfect, he said, whipping out his wallet. Gift wrapped will be fine. Lauren's mentality tallied the total and decided that if she didn't make a sale the rest of the month, this alone would match half of what she'd added to Razzle Dazzle's business account. Sure, you can pay me when I finish wrapping them, she said. Did you want to wait? Part of her hoped he would, and another part of her wished he would leave, give her a few minutes to calm her rapid heartbeat, brush her hair, put on mascara, and lip balm. You said an hour? Yes, to gift wrap them. Is there a place a guy can grab breakfast around here? I could use a bite to eat. Angels were smiling down on her today. Yes, 2 blocks west of here, right on King Street, you'll find Ruby's Diner. Best food in Fallen Springs. She added because it was true. Thanks. I'll go have a bite and see you in an hour. She nodded because her mouth was so dry that her tongue was sticking to the roof of her mouth. Before she could Before she did anything stupid, she went to the office, chugged a bottle of water, brushed her hair, took the mascara from her purse, and added 3 coats to her pale lashes. She searched for lipstick, but all she could find was an old tube of Dr. Pepper lip balm, her favorite since high school. Right now, more than anything, she wished Madison was here with her purse full of high-end makeup. As soon as she finished, she packed each music box into its original packaging. Then she wrapped them one by one, all in different paper. As Mr. Hunk hadn't specified any particular style of paper, of course, she had been so flustered that she hadn't shown him her selection either. She'd hoped for the best. She took her time with each box, sad to see them go, but thrilled with what their purchases did for Razzle Dazzle's bottom line. Mom would be beside herself when she told her about this huge sale. Dad would be reinforced in his beliefs that the store would continue to hold its own. Lauren packed each wrapped music box in 3 of Razzle Dazzle's reusable cloth bags and then placed them 2 to a few larger bags in the hope they wouldn't bang against one another and break. After the amount this was going to cost Mr. Hunk, surely he would be extra careful when he loaded his car with his purchases. Though she didn't recall seeing a car parked in front of the store, and this early in the day, she would have noticed. Maybe his friend who has the birthday on Christmas dropped him off. No, that didn't make sense because Lauren would have seen that too. There was one taxi service in Fallen Springs, and she hadn't seen it either. Maybe he had walked, but from where? The only lodging in Fallen Springs was the Langdon House, a beautiful bed and breakfast that rarely had a vacancy, as it only had 4 rooms. This was absolutely none of her business, though Lauren knew he was not from Fallen Springs. She would have known had someone like him lived here. He stood out like a giant, and a very handsome one too. No, he definitely was not local. Of that, she was sure. She placed the 3 bags on the counter next to her old-fashioned cash register and prayed that he would be writing a check, because if he used a credit card, she'd have to use their ancient slide machine. Something about this guy was sharp and contemporary, and he probably didn't have a clue what an old credit card machine like the stores looked like. She no more had the thought when the bell jingled again. Only this time, instead of Mr. Hunk, it was Brent Ludmore. Lauren felt her stomach knot and wished to high heaven he'd chosen another time to pop in. "Hey, Brent, what's up?" she forced herself to ask. "Not much, just trying to keep the citizens of Water County safe for one more day. She laughed. That's pretty easy, I would think. She regretted the words as soon as they came out of her mouth. He just told her at dinner the other night that illegal drug use was rampant in Fallen Springs, and the sheriff's department was hiring more deputies just to keep up with it. I didn't mean that the way it came out, she added, hoping to curb any hurt feelings her comment might have caused. Granted, it's not the toughest job in the world of law enforcement, but we have our moments. I thought I'd stop by, check on you, see how your dad's doing. Dad's just fine. He actually drove to Pine City yesterday to see Grandpa. If you didn't know, you would think he was in perfect health. Yesterday was a good day, though. He's starting a new medication, so I'm hoping he'll have more good days rather than bad ones once he's been on it for a while. I guess time will tell. Brent walked over to the empty display where the music boxes had been. What happened to all the fancy boxes? I sold them, she added, wanting to ask, wasn't it obvious? But she kept that thought to herself. Nice, he said. Actually, I just sold them this morning to a new customer. I sent the customer to Ruby's so I'd have time to wrap them all. A collector? Brent asked. I don't think so. She didn't want to say he because Brent would question her even more. Said they were buying them for a birthday gift. Apparently, the lucky person's birthday is Christmas Day. Not sure if I'd like that. Me either. But it's not like one has a choice, she said, grinning. It's kind of out of your hands, she thought of Madison's new baby. Not a Christmas birthday, but maybe a 4th of July baby. That would be a bang, she thought. Pretty much, Brent said. She nodded. So you have any plans tonight? He asked. She knew checking on her dad wasn't the only reason he'd stopped by. She did not have plans other than working, then realized she hadn't told Brent about her new book contract. And for some odd reason, she didn't want to tell him just yet. Later, after her trip to Seattle, she would, but at the moment, she wanted to keep this to herself. Actually, I'm doing some research, so I'll be glued to the, she almost said, internet. But he didn't need to know that either. Books, just a project I'm interested in. Well, I hope that's all it is, he said. What's that supposed to mean? He shook his head. That you're not just saying that to keep me away. Brent, I don't want to get into this now. You know how I feel. And this was not the time to discuss her lack of romantic interest in him. I do have some good news to share with you. I'm going to be a mom, she said. But when she saw the look on his face, she realized she'd left out one critical word. A cat mom. She saw the relief on his face. I went to the shelter this morning, and not only did I adopt a mama cat, her name's Daisy, I also adopted her kittens, Ivy and Yule. He laughed. For a minute, I thought you were having a baby. Yeah, that's a good thing to do. Animals are a good substitute for kids. Brent, that's mean, she said, and she wasn't joking. You know what I meant, he said. Until you settle down and have a family of your own, pets are almost as good as kids, unconditional love and all. Lauren wanted to tell him there weren't a lot of choices in Fallen Springs, but that was a low blow. She wasn't that cruel. Yes, they do give love in return. The shelter wouldn't allow the kittens to be separated from their mother, and I agreed to take all three. I think Dad will get a kick out of it. You remember how crazy he was over Buzz? Brent laughed. He thought that cat was a dog. He did, and Buzz acted like a dog too. I miss that furry guy. Well, as I said, I just wanted to stop in, check on your dad. You tell him I'll stop by for a beer this weekend, Brent said. And I'll bring pizza from Papa Joe's. Sounds good. I'll tell Dad, she said, relieved that he was leaving. Saturday or Sunday? Which day is best? He asked. The bell jingled on the door, and of course, Mr. Hunk's timing couldn't have been worse. I'll call Dad and ask. I'll get back to you, she said, feeling the heat of embarrassment rise to her face. Do that, Brent said, walking past Mr. Hunk as he exited the store. She nodded and hoped her face didn't show what she really felt. So how was your meal? Really, Lauren? Excellent. Some of the best biscuits and gravy I've had. Good. Well, I have your packages ready. She pointed to the 3 bags sitting on the counter. Perfect, she said, reaching for his wallet and pulling out an American Express card. Lauren almost laughed. Yes, they took credit cards. Yes, the machine was ancient, but no, they did not take American Express. Her father's reasoning, their rates were too high. He held the card out for her to take. Sorry, we don't accept American Express. She was embarrassed, truly red-faced and humiliated. Well, try this. He took another card from his wallet. Visa, she said. That we take. She reached under the counter for the machine, and one of the carbon copies she used to get an imprint of the card number. Oh boy, he said. This is a tap and go. A what? Lauren asked. Tap and go. Touch the terminal, he said again. This, she said, pointing to the machine on the counter, along with the carbon slip, It's all we have. Mr. Hunk burst out laughing. Tell me you're joking. He was shaking his head, but his grin was such a turn on. Lauren laughed with him. Sadly, I'm not joking. This is it. Then it's a good thing I always carry a couple of blank checks with me. He put the credit cards back in his wallet and took out a check. Lauren couldn't wait to see his information on the check. Checks are fine, she said, smiling. Just make it payable to Razzle Dazzle Decor. How much? He asked, accepting the pen she held out to him. Lauren gave him the amount, and he didn't flinch. Not even a little bit. He wrote out the check, and she was about to ask to see his driver's license so she could write the details on the back of the check as her father always did, even if he knew the customer. But she couldn't bring herself to ask this man one more question that would make her appear to be even more of a country bumpkin. At that moment, she would have gladly strangled her father if he were there. Instead, she pushed the cash button on the ancient register, the same national cash register machine her grandfather had used in his day, pulled the handle, and the drawer opened. She placed his check inside, then closed the drawer. Mr. Hunk watched her, seemingly fascinated. Is that original? Puzzled, Lauren asked. This? She nodded in the direction of the register. Yes. She took a deep breath. Everything is original. My grandfather used the same machine in his day. Lauren thought he would laugh, but he appeared intrigued. You sure don't see many of these around anymore, he said. Mind if I have a closer look? Her heart rate doubling, and for a minute she thought maybe this was a newfangled way of committing a robbery and wished Brent would return. But common sense took over. This man was not here to rob her of the $99 and change she kept in the drawer. Though she wished she'd read the name on the check, just in case. Hesitantly, she said, "Go ahead." He must have picked up on her nervousness because he just peered around the counter to look at the keys on the old register. Very special. I doubt there are more than a handful of these still in service, he said after a minute. Thanks for your time, he added, taking the 3 bags and walking toward the exit. Oh, Merry Christmas, he called out, grinning and causing her insides to twist in a knot, in a good way. She waved but didn't return the sentiment. Lauren returned to the office in a bit of a daze. She never had this kind of response to a strange man before. Or any man, if she were honest. Though it had been more than apparent that he didn't have any sort of reaction to her other than amusement at the antiqued cash register. She opened her laptop, intending to see if she had any email. When it occurred to her she hadn't looked at the name on the check. Racing out of the office, she took the check out of the drawer, then read the name. Jag Enterprises, MetLife Building, 200 Park Avenue, New York, New York, 10166. New York City. She looked at his signature, but it was illegible. That's lovely, she said out loud, tossing the check on her desk. There wasn't even a phone number. Odd, she thought, because all checks have phone numbers. Or is Jag Enterprises so upscale they don't feel they need a phone number on their checks? It didn't matter. The check was drawn on a major international bank, so she deposited on her way home. If it bounced, she would deal with it. Lauren returned to her email account and saw that she had 9 emails from Angela. All had been sent 2 hours earlier. Doesn't she know how to pick up the phone? Lauren took her cell phone out of her bag. No charge. No wonder Angela kept emailing. She dialed her office using the store's phone, and Angela picked up on the first ring. I swear I couldn't find the number for your little store. And your cell keeps going to voicemail. Listen, things has changed. Okay, she said, fill me in. She raked a hand through her hair, loosening the tangles. I know the weather is still crappy there because I've been watching the Weather Channel. Yep, it's snowing. It's not a blizzard, right? Angela asked. No. Listen, Mr. G wants to get started on his bio as soon as possible. He knows the weather is not ideal, but get this. He's sending his private jet to Asheville to fly you to Seattle. Is this awesome or what? All flights are canceled, you know that. All commercial flights. Private planes can still fly into Asheville, Lauren. Dumbfounded, it took her a few seconds to reply. If commercial airlines aren't flying, I am not going to fly in this weather. I don't care what kind of aircraft the man owns. Is he crazy? If he can't wait for this weather to clear, I'm not sure I want to write the bio of some guy who's willing to put me in danger. Besides, I just adopted 3 cats, and I have to be home tomorrow for an inspection. Silence. I didn't say you have to leave today. I meant in the next couple of days. His secretary called this morning, said he would be happy to send his jet for you when it's clear, Lauren. Oh, well, you didn't tell me that. Now you know. So are you good with hopping a private jet to Seattle to earn $3.5 million? She laughed. I e-signed the contract, so I don't think I have a choice. Though I have to be here when Dr. Mello comes for the inspection. You know, Lauren, we've known one another for a long time. I think we're friends, right? Of course, Lauren said. In all this time, not once have you ever mentioned you were a cat lover. She chuckled. See, there's more to me than meets the eye. Angela cackled. You're good people, but a cat lady? I had no idea. I had cats growing up. A couple of dogs, too. Just promise me you can be ready on a moment's notice and get yourself to the airport in Asheville so you can meet Mr. G in Seattle. Lauren rolled her eyes. I said I would. It's a couple of hours to Asheville in good weather, just so you know. I do. Keep your phone charged, Angela instructed, and give me your shop number and home number. Lauren gave her the numbers, promising to be on Mr. Giampello's private jet when the weather let up. Finally, having a few minutes to herself, Lauren made a cup of tea, her thoughts returning to the mysterious customer who'd spent a small fortune, at least in the store's world, on music boxes. Jag Enterprises. She'd never heard of it. With her new internet access, all she had to do was type the name in the search engine. Did she really want to? She knew there were those who thrived on this practice, finding out every single crumb they could on the unlucky or lucky soul who happened to be the subject of their search. In a way, it seemed sneaky, but in another way, the ability to have whatever you wanted at your fingertips was so tempting that she found herself typing Jag Enterprises into the search bar. She hit the return button and dozens of blue hyperlinks filled her screen. She clicked on the first link, nothing there, a food supply company. Next link, still nothing. She tried a few more, then logged off. Why did she even care who he was? Just because he was beyond handsome and sexy and just so happened to show up in her store. She needed to get to work on something substantial. The bio would fill her time. Once her initial meeting was over, she could focus on reality and her new kittens. Smiling, she decided to take an early lunch, go to Ruby's, and just relax. Again, she left the house without making a lunch. Lauren put the out to lunch sign in the window. Then, making sure to put her coat on, she walked the 2 blocks to her favorite restaurant. If she continued this pattern, she'd be the size of a barn. Inside Ruby's, the smell of the yeast rolls made her mouth water. She sat at the counter because she knew that in less than half an hour, the place would be filled with the business lunch crowd. And she was just one person. She took her coat off and draped it across her lap. Ruby saw her. You having lunch again? I couldn't resist, she said. What's today's special? Meatloaf, mashed potatoes with butter beans, and a salad, Ruby said. That was a little too heavy for her. How about a grilled cheese with a cup of your vegetable soup? Lauren asked. She was a big fan of Meatloaf and usually would have jumped at the chance to have it at Ruby's, but not today. Coming in, Louise called out. Anything to drink? Coffee. Just made a fresh pot. Sounds good. It's freezing out there, Lauren said. You want a roll? Just out of the oven? Ruby asked her. Sure, Lauren said. She might as well. She'd run around the store and burn off the extra calories. The door behind her opened, bringing in a gush of cold air. It is cold out there, said Mr. Hump, as he sat down on the stool next to her. Back again? Ruby hollered to him. I thought those biscuits and gravy would tide you over for at least a couple of hours. What can I say? He quipped. I'm a growing boy. He laughed, and Lauren's stomach did flip-flops. During their exchange, Lauren hadn't turned to look at him, fearful of her reaction. What is he doing here? Doesn't he have birthday gifts to deliver or something? Her pulse quickened when his arm brushed against hers. Excuse me, he said to her. Crap. I can't ignore the guy now. You're fine. Hey, it's the girl from the Christmas store. She cringed. Yeah, that would be me, she said, hoping Ruby and Louise didn't notice the blush on her cheeks. So, does the girl from the Christmas store have a name? He asked, not unkindly. Girl, please. Yes, I do. I tell you what, if you tell me yours, I'll tell you mine. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Lauren, I'm John. He swirled his bar stool around so that he faced her. Nice to meet you, she said. Louise chose that moment to slam Lauren's coffee cup on the counter, sending coffee flying through the air and landing smack dab in the middle of her sweater. Oh, honey, I'm sorry. You okay? Lauren jumped up and used her coat to blot her sweater. I'm fine, no worries. I piled on a few layers this morning. Here, let me, Mr. Hump, John said, grabbing several napkins from the holder and blotting at her sweater, an inch below her chest. No, really, I'm fine, she said, feeling all tingly inside. To prove it, she stood up and, with her back to him, pulled the heavy sweater over her head. Her chambray shirt was dry, as was the light t-shirt she was wearing underneath it. I'm fine. She sat down facing the kitchen window where Ruby placed the orders for Louise to deliver them. I'm sorry, kid. I'm just a klutz, Louise repeated. Lauren needed to get control of herself. It's fine, truly. I wasn't hurt, but I would like another cup of coffee. She smiled, doing her best to act like an adult. She wished people would stop calling her kid. She was small, knew she looked younger than her biological age. But right now, it was embarrassing. John, the, John, though she struggled to think of him as anything other than Mr. Hunk, spoke to her. Do you come here for lunch every day? Plastering a smile on her face, she turned to him. No, just when I forget to bring something from home. Her heart beat so fast. She knew that if he looked closely, he would see the pulse pounding in her neck. Lauren felt another wash of cold air. She looked at the clock. Noon. The lunch rush had begun, and she couldn't recall ever waiting this long for a sandwich. She thought of asking Ruby to pack it to go, but then it might be obvious that the man seated beside her was having an effect on her. At least she thought it would. You're new in town, she said, then took a sip of her coffee. I'll be around just for a few days. I'm here on business. Lauren couldn't possibly imagine what a man from New York City could do as a profession that would bring him to Fallen Springs on a business trip. That's nice. It is somewhat of an inconvenience. I'm here only as a favor to my business partner. I needed a break from the city, though. Then you must be staying at the Langdon House. That was the only place to stay in Fallen Springs. No, I'm at the Biltmore. That's not very convenient. Lauren's words flew out of her mouth. She thought about Brent Ludmore, what he said about drugs, and wondered if this slick, handsome guy was a drug dealer. No way was she going to ask him what type of business he was in. Obviously, from his appearance and the amount of money he'd spent at Razzle Dazzle, he earned a decent salary. No, it's not, but I like the place. My driver doesn't seem to mind. He has a driver. That's probably a good thing, then, especially since the roads have been so icy. We don't usually have harsh winters. Yes, that's what I've heard. Personally, I like the snow, at least in small amounts. We have plenty of the stuff in the city, but after a day or two, it's nothing but a messy gray slush. Here you go, Louise said, placing her soup and sandwich on the counter. Smells good. I'll have what she's having, John said to Louise. You know, I thought you was just here to stay out of the cold. Maybe flirt a little with Lauren. Give me 3 minutes, and it's on the house. Lauren prayed for an earthquake, anything to take her away from the utter humiliation she was feeling. He laughed. Thanks, and a coffee too, please. Louise poured him a coffee and also refilled Lauren's cup. Lauren took a bite of her grilled cheese, feeling self-conscious, eating with this man beside her. It was how she used to feel in college when she was on a first date. 3 minutes later, Ruby brought John's soup and sandwich to him. As my sister said, it's on the house. She winked at him, and Lauren laughed. Ruby was a flirt. So what kind of nightlife do they have around here? John asked her. She almost choked, but managed to force a chunk of bread down her throat. In Falling Springs? That's where we are, he said. We, as in the two of them. It was lunchtime. He must be referring to Christmas birthday girl. There's a movie theater, Lauren struggled to come out with an answer because there wasn't a ton of nightlife here. O'Brien's usually has a band on the weekends. It's a local bar, mostly where the younger crowd hangs out. What about you? What do you do in your free time? Take care of my parents, but she wasn't going to tell him that. She'd tell him the partial truth. I'm an author by profession. I read a lot. He looked at her as if for the first time. Seriously? Lauren couldn't help but grin. Seriously. Anything I would know? Depends on what you like to read, she said. Suddenly, she didn't feel so backward, out of place in his presence. After all, she'd written 4 New York Times bestsellers, and she was far from a novice in her profession. I read everything from thrillers, legal procedurals, biographies, and sometimes I'll give Stephen King a read. Not bad, she thought. Good variety, she said, then took another bite because she really was hungry. Her soup was cold, but she'd take it back to the store and heat it in the microwave. The last thing she wanted to do was slurp soup in front of this man. So you're hoping to publish a book? That's quite the undertaking, but admirable, he stated. Lauren stopped chewing, slowly turning her stool so that she faced him. Knowing she was being rude, she didn't care. She continued to stare at him, and as expected, he turned his bar stool to face her. He looked at her, the beginning of a smile tipping up the corners of his mouth. What? You said hoping to publish a book. What makes you think I haven't already? You would have told me, he replied. Most authors, at least the ones I've met, can't wait to tell you about their work. Okay, I'll give him that. But he was wrong to assume that just because she didn't toot her own horn, it didn't mean she hadn't published a book or any kind of written word. She could be a poet for all he knew, or a horror author. I keep my professional life to myself. I totally understand, he said. Sure he does, she thought. Probably has a car full of drugs, just waiting to find a club where he can sell the stuff. And getting the kids Brent talked about hooked on some deadly concoction. Focusing on her food, Lauren took another bite, washing it down with coffee. Louise, could you pack up my soup? I've got to get back to work. She had to get away from this man, but no one needed to know that. Sure thing, kiddo. Give me a minute. Louise disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a takeaway bowl and lid. Here you go. Thanks, Lauren said, then went through the process of pouring her cup of soup into the plastic bowl. She felt him watching her. Her hands shook. She chewed the sides of her mouth, anything to keep her from doing or saying something she'd regret, like, could you stop staring at me, or something to that effect, as his gaze made her insides turn to mush. Doing her best to ignore him, she packed up the soup, took a $10 bill from her pocket, and as always, tucked it under her empty bowl. He reached out and took the $10 bill and held it out to her. My treat, he asked. Lauren was getting all kinds of mixed signals from this guy. Most of them she didn't need or want. I can pay for my own lunch, she said, then tried to take the $10 bill from him. He yanked his arm away, holding it high in the air. The only way she could reach it was to stand on the bar stool and rip it out of his hand. No, even Lauren knew what a fool she'd make of herself if she did this. So she said, thank you. You're welcome, Lauren. He handed her money back to her and placed $10 on the counter. Before he had an opportunity to speak, she grabbed the takeout dish and rushed out the door. A few local business owners said hello, but she didn't bother responding. She wanted to get back to the store, back to her comfort zone. Mr. Hunk was not part of her comfort zone. The Brightest Star, FERN Michaels, Chapter 14. The Christmas album premieres November 1st, 2023 at Turnpike Plaza, 360.